My younger brother's excesses caused my parents to postpone my birthday celebration. I am 20 years old, and this happened to me when I was 14. My brother, who is roughly 6 years younger than me, was diagnosed with high-functioning autism at the age of 4, so my parents gave him additional attention. Other than that, though, he seems perfectly normal. He was just incredibly indulged and exploited that to get his way a lot. And when I say a lot, I mean almost always. He had to have all I had. That implied that we had bubbles containing practically everything that we didn't share, and he would make every effort to rub it in my face if he had something I didn't. I begged my parents for a 3 deciseconds for my 12th birthday when I was 11 years old. I was given one, but it was a lot, and I was told to give it to my brother whenever he needed it, or else I would have it taken away. Upon learning that my parents had physically taken my 3 deciseconds from me to give to my brother during one of her visits, my aunt became enraged with them for their obvious partiality. After my aunt left, they promptly returned my 3 deciseconds and accused me of being the reason I hadn't forced my brother to have it back. Rather, a few days later, my parents went shopping and got another 3 deciseconds as a surprise gift for my brother on a few of my birthdays, as well as other people's. The fact that the celebration wasn't all about him caused my brother to raise a lot of commotion. He even went so far as to say that he was angry that he wasn't receiving any gifts or getting to blow out the candles on the cake. My parents were actually ejected from a few of those events because they attempted to support my brother in a way that would have pleased them, a lesson they learned the hard way. And as a result, other students at his school stopped extending birthday invitations to him. Birthdays were some of the few days I got to spend just being myself, because on other days my parents had me live my life just for my younger brother. And the year before this tale happened, my parents ended up giving him more attention during my 13th birthday, asking me to let my brother blow out my candles on my behalf because he was acting grumpy. I wanted to blow out my own candles, so I declined. Initially, they branded me a spoilt child, but my aunt stepped in and corrected them for their continued favoritism and said she'd noticed a lot, how, due to his autism, my brother receives almost everything between the two of us. Other than my brother, who was still crying because he didn't get to blow out my candles and because he didn't get his way, my parents received no support from anyone else there. Out of spite, he attempted to spit directly over my cake, but my amazing man stopped him before he could do so and reprimanded him till he rushed to my mom in tears. After taking a lot of flack from the other adults in attendance, my parents made a vow to never ask my brother to blow out my candles again. But for the remainder of the celebration, they essentially just went through the motions. From then on, I very much took over the coordination of everything. My birthday celebration was essentially canceled the year after, but my parents still planned to purchase me some gifts and a little cake just a few weeks before my birthday to keep my brother from having another tantrum. When I told them I couldn't believe they were mistreating me, they only appeared indifferent to my words. Thus, during the course of the following week at school, I told my teachers, friends, and even my school counselor. They were all horrified by my parents' lack of empathy or care. Even the vice principal found out and gave me consolation. And social media was how my parents learned about all of this. I was grounded for being unhappy, but I continued to tell everyone at school about it even after my parents gaslighted and punished me for telling so many people. My birthday was called off without any justification. That must have made things much worse because, in essence, what the hell is wrong with them was what many of my parents' friends and the parents of other students in my school said when they called or sent them Facebook messages. All of a sudden, I felt unanchored, nor did I receive an apology. With his arms crossed, my father entered my room and abruptly told me that my grounding was over. He then left, and that was all. Since no one had commented, I assumed that my party was still off, and my brother found it amusing to point out that I wouldn't be able to celebrate. However, my parents claimed that was their intention after throwing a surprise party for me at my favorite restaurant at the conclusion of the 2 weeks. I'd known it wasn't all along. Based on what I had observed, everyone was furious with them for what they'd done, and it was evident in every conversation my parents had with other family members. In order to attempt and save what little reputation they still had, they ultimately decided to pull off the surprise party. However, I believe they had to pay a hefty price that day simply to make room for me. I went to my favorite restaurant with a small arcade for dinner with all of my friends, and I even got the PS4 game system I've been dying for. My aunt jokingly compared my dad's appearance to that of a moth, so I could tell at the time that everything was essentially planned and purchased at the last minute. Naturally, my brother caused quite a stir when I received that surprise party, but with so many of my friends and their parents present, my parents eventually had to intervene and stop my brother's tantrum when he tried to push my cake off the table. For the first time since he was a toddler, my brother ended up in a timeout, and my mom had to watch over him to make sure he didn't do anything out of the ordinary. He did make multiple attempts to dash towards the cake or gift stack. If there hadn't been an adult on guard at all times, who knows what he would have done. My father even stood watch to keep him at bay. In the end, my mom had to take my brother and herself out of the party completely and took my younger brother to a nearby McDonald's to play in their play area. She reportedly tried for at least an hour to get him out of the play place tube structure, but he only gave up when he had to use the restroom, and he immediately tried to run back in. My parents never attempted to postpone our anniversary while I was still living with them, so they never made the same amount of effort or expenditure for the 4 years that remain. I was inside their house. My birthday celebrations included a cake with my name off of it, a local pizzeria, and never again anything as pricey as a brand new gaming system. Not to come across as spoiled, but I was a little let down. I never again received a cake with my name on it. My aunt called my parents out on that each year, and each year they claimed they forgot to get the cake decorated. I'm pretty sure that the reason my name was never written on another cake was because my brother always refused to eat pieces of cake that had writing of someone else's name on it at any party, and they couldn't put his name on any of my cakes, or it would have looked very bad for them. But the fact that I still got a day that was just about me at all, and not my brother, was still fantastic in my book, especially because just about everything else revolved around him during each of my remaining birthday parties. While still living at home, my brother made a fuss, and my mom took him somewhere else to calm him down. I was still required to share my floor with my brother, but it was still mine, and I took it with me. When I moved out at 18, little bro did not like that and had a huge fight till my parents went out and bought another PS4 for him. When I moved out, they finally had to deal with how they'd raised my brother. So spoiled because I wasn't there to help them with him anymore. On his recent 14th birthday, he went mental on our parents for not getting him a 5. He is now currently grounded for I don't know how long after causing hundreds or maybe even thousands in collateral damage during his rampage. He picked up a chair and just started destroying anything that was in front of him with it. And my parents just looked mentally checked out when I saw them last. My aunt has also told me they confided in her that they wish they could send my brother to military or boarding school in the future because they can't handle the monster they created anymore. But there's no way they can afford that. I'd be lying if I said I didn't find it ironically funny. Update 1. My parents were thrown out of a child's birthday party because they asked the stupidest thing imaginable. For those who read my previous post about how my parents tried to cancel my 14th birthday, they knew very well what my brother was like during birthday parties that weren't his own, and they tried to enable his behavior in any way they could just because he's high-functioning autistic. Well, that ramp and spoiling didn't go well with people outside of the family, like, at all. This happened, I think, when my brother was around 6 to 7 years old. A neighbor boy down the street was having his birthday party, and my brother got invited because they were sort of friends, but probably because they knew my parents would bring a gift, and they did. Don't remember what it was, though, nor do I really care. My parents dragged me along to this party, even though I'd have rather stayed home and played video games. I was bored and sitting down almost the entire time, so I got to witness pretty much the whole situation. It started when my brother was caught picking up gifts off the table and shaking them. The mother of the birthday boy told him to stop, and my parents tried to defend my brother and say he was harmless. But the lady knew what my brother was really like, and had my parents move him away from the presents. There were some games that the kids were playing. Don't remember what they were, but I do remember my brother tried to be the center of attention as much as possible with each game. The birthday boy got first picks, turn on them all because it was his birthday, but my brother freaked out because he didn't get to be first. And my parents did ask the birthday boy's mother if my brother could get the first pick turns. And the lady not only refused, but told my parents to get my brother under control, or we'd all be asked to leave. Then came time for the cake. The mother lit the candles for the birthday boy, and the adults started singing the happy birthday song. They only got as far as singing the birthday boy's name in the song. Before my brother went into a tantrum at the table, he grabbed the side of the table and started trying to aggressively shake it. My parents had to hold my brother back for a moment, and then I saw my mother go up and talk to the mother of the birthday boy again about something, and the poor lady looked positively disgusted. and I learned later that she'd asked her to let my brother blow out the candles first, and then they could redo it. The lady advised my mother that it would be best if we left, and then they went back to trying to rewrite the birthday song. Well, my brother couldn't handle it and raced to the table and shoved the whole cake right at the birthday boy. I mean, he used his arm to actually clothesline the cake and chuck it right into that poor kid's face. The whole room was silent for a few seconds, and then a bunch of the kids started laughing. Then the birthday boy started crying, and the adults were all humiliated except for my parents. My mother just started clutching my brother firmly and behaving like a Karen by saying, "This might have been stopped if they only let my brother blow out the candles first." The mother of the birthday child was washing up chocolate cake off her son and screaming at my parents to get out. The other kids there started crying since it had finally sunk them that now there was no cake. My mother started hauling my brother out, but he got free of her and then pushed over the table with all the presents on it. I grabbed him and held him in a headlock till my parents got him. I apologized sincerely to the mother of the birthday kid and explained I wasn't on my parents' side in the situation. Yeah, that's right. Little 12-year-old me had to apologize for my own parents. My dad yelled to me to get moving or I could walk home. I promised to walk home. It was precisely a quarter of a mile away from us. I stayed to assist in tidying up my brother's mess. The woman praised me and stated my sibling was just bad, but I was a nice egg. The birthday guy had to take a shower because he was covered in cake, so someone went outside and got another cake. They cleaned up the entire mess and performed the birthday song again. The birthday boy's mother scribbled something down on a scrap of paper after the celebration. It was a written threat to contact the police, accompanied by a handwritten invoice to my parents for the ruined cake. Is there a camera person present? Captured everything. When I sent my parents the invoice, they didn't appear to be very pleased with it. After that, they handed me the money and instructed me to return it to the woman. I did as I said I would, and that was that. That child and his family never again had anything to do with my brother or my parents. The problematic aspect, however, is that the very same scenario was almost replicated at a different birthday celebration many months later. When my mother begged the parents if my brother may blow out the candles, they flatly refused, and my mother pretended to be a total Karen. My brother attempted to topple the cake. I saw him coming and stopped him. After that, we were instructed to go. My brother was never longer invited to birthday celebrations hosted by people other than family following that. Then, when I turned 13 the next year, my aunt angrily confronted my parents for trying to force me to let my brother blow out my candles. I suppose that's when my parents decided that I shouldn't have a party at all the following year if I couldn't share. And as prior readers are aware, that wasn't how it worked out. The minibike mayhem of my small brother was made possible by my parents' update. I purchased a used minibike when I was 17 and used it to commute to and from a part-time job. Readers of my earlier blogs are aware of my younger brother's personality. My brother wanted to have everything I had, and if I refused to give it, my parents would usually take it, at least until that conduct was made public. The guy my parents extra coddled because he was identified as high-functioning autistic. The attempt by my parents to postpone my 14th birthday. My brother threw some more severe tantrums once my parents stopped making me give him anything every time he asked for them. My parents really stocked up on plates from thrift shops as a result of my brother's tendency to find objects around the home to hurl to the ground and shatter, mainly dishes. My brother was not happy when I acquired the minibike. Though he's destructive with all these things, I would never let him ride it. I was the one who had to fix his broken BMX every time. He urged my parents to get him a stunt BMX, and they spent hundreds on it. As much as he loves it, he never maintains it himself or takes good care of it. It needs new brake lines, handlebars, tires, and other parts, just gives me a call and begs me to make the fix. He never bothers to do anything more than pump up a tire, even though my parents got him the components and have the tools. Even then, he typically seeks to get assistance from someone else. He also leaves the bike in an extremely careless manner. He left it in the neighbor's driveway, and the neighbor's van ran over its handlebars. He damaged the pedals in some way, so a new set had to be installed. Though it was understandable that he was upset over the tire and damaged the rear brake line, it wasn't hard to replace, and I shouldn't have had to come over on a Saturday to fix it when my brother is more than capable of doing it himself. It's true that I won't allow him to take my little bike on a joyride, especially given how expensive gas is these days. You can get about 60 miles per gallon on a mini bike. What now? That it only travels at 40 miles per hour. Even though I only commute 5 miles, my parents called me a month before my brother turned 14, pleading with me to fix the BMX. The back tire was nearly completely worn out by little brother. Despite my annoyance, I went over because they were offering to pay. It was getting close to 100 degrees, so I changed the tire and settled down with a bottle of water that particular day. My brother stood by while I worked on the bike till I finished. Since he was wearing a helmet, I assumed he was simply getting ready to go on a bike ride. However, as soon as I turned to face the other direction, I heard my little bike start up and go. On it, my little brother shot down the street like a rocket. I panicked out before I could get out of the garage, but my parents tried to downplay it. They promised to get my mini bike back straight away if I didn't appease them. But to them, it really meant waiting till my brother returned with it. I wanted to call the police since I was irritated, but I'm not sure if they would classify it as a domestic issue. It took an hour for my brother to return. He had managed to avoid crashing, but as soon as he noticed me, he raced off once more. He rode the bike until the petrol ran out, at which point my parents had to come pick him up. It would be an understatement to say I was incensed, but my parents essentially rolled their eyes, gave me $40, and promised it would never happen again. The next time I would call the police, I said, "Better not when." I'm not sure if it helped, but it appeared that they heeded my caution. Before I could head home, I had to push my little bike to the closest gas station to fill up. I told my parents before I left that they should get my brother a mini bike if he really wants one. However, they later made a complete 180-degree turn and claimed that he wasn't ready for one because it would be too much responsibility and too risky because it would essentially be a motorcycle. They really don't want to get him one themselves. They just let him take mine for like 2 hours so he could go joyriding to God knows where. Whatever. By now, I'm accustomed to their duplicity. When I visited my parents the last time, my brother was severely grounded and had gone into his room for a birthday meltdown. Just to be clear, I removed the spark plug wire from my bike before I entered the house, as I mentioned in my first post. From his window, my brother was glaring at me. I drove off, giving him a silly wave as I went. Update 3. I advised my parents to sell a number of my brother's belongings in order to recoup a portion of the money they spent on his outburst. They didn't think twice, but there's still more. I talked to my parents about how they could probably recover some of their losses from the birthday rampage by selling a lot of my brother's belongings after someone suggested a while ago that they sell a lot of his stuff. How easily they agreed that it was a good idea astonished me. For them, it was truly a light bulb moment. They then held a sizable garage sale over the weekend. Everything was sold, including my brother's video game consoles and bike. I could hear my brother sobbing in his room when I went to assist with the selling. He sold every video gaming console he owned, and there were a lot of them. They sold every console he owned, including the GameCube, Wii, 3 deciseconds, PS3 for Xbox 360, Xbox One, and an enormous library of games. Although I was quite tempted to purchase something from the sale, I knew that my brother would find out that I have something that he once owned. What could he possibly do? Thus, I refrained. The bike sold for $30 by itself. Along with selling his gaming PC online, they also sold his TV, remote control cars, drone, and pretty much whatever else technological he owned. Additionally, there is an inexpensive laptop, but he was not allowed to use it for anything other than school. During my visit during the sale, my brother raced back into his room screaming loudly after seeing me and leaving his door once. My parents informed me that everything had been taken out of my brother's room save for the necessities. I could tell when he was crying artificially, and it was really convincing. My parents are aware of this as well and have resisted his tricks. When I asked if he would be sent to therapy, they stated that they really had no choice but to do so, and that they completely accepted that they were to blame for giving him so much support for such a long time. Even though I might have shoved it in their faces, I believe the expression on my face told them what was going on. They have been living in ever deeper denial about their poor parenting for the past few years. They'd been hearing from friends and family for a while now that they had gone too far in spoiling my brother, and that it would eventually catch up with them and possibly make him incapable of becoming an adult. And if that's the case, he would anticipate that someone would always be there to meet his needs. Furthermore, I wouldn't take on his care until they get too old. Over the next few weeks, my brother's condition didn't get much better. He continued to act like a brat, feign tears, get into more mischief, and even took another student's cell phone to school. My parents had to return it to the school to find out who owned it after they discovered him playing with it in his closet. I proposed a family intervention last week as a result of an idea. When I brought it up, my parents were apprehensive, but they eventually consented. They were hesitant, I'm sure, because my brother and they would be put on the spot if there was an intervention. Following, everyone in my immediate family and a few acquaintances could get together at my parents' house on the following available day. At first, my brother wasn't present in the living room when we arranged ourselves in a circle of chairs. Speaking first, my aunt really gave them a hard time. We all listened in silence as she read aloud the full speech she had written. When it was my turn to speak, my parents occasionally attempted to interrupt, but they were hushed. I also read a speech I had written that essentially reiterated what I had said so far on Reddit and much more. After that, it just kind of happened down the line to my grandparents. My father simply embraced my mother as she sobbed. They both profusely apologized to me, calling me a horrible child and ruining my life. Never will I get that back. I vehemently expressed that they ought not to have had to face their own duplicity, and that going forward, they should improve not just for my benefit, but also primarily for my brother's, who deserves to grow up normally. My mother would feel compelled to console my brother when he was angry, so he was positioned across from my parents when he was brought into the room after them. The family quickly began to be critical of my brother. He made many attempts to fight us, but we all gave up on him when his only defense was to utter things like, "If only they would just let me have my way." On how the world operates differently from that, our mother refused to even look at him when he tried to ask for assistance. He began to splutter and appeared to be having a hyperventilation before purposefully collapsing to the ground. This is not his first instance of doing it. He should get up and stop milking it, my aunt advised him. He yelled at her, saying he wished we were all dead because we were all wrecking his life. My folks were appalled. Each person gave a brief explanation of their reason for being there to my brother, but he would not get up from the floor and continued to breathe heavily, giving the impression that he was having an attack. He let out a few random screams, but remained in his lying position. My brother would not get up off the floor, so my parents had to physically bring him back to his room when everyone eventually started leaving. He isn't used to people not feeling sorry for him, particularly our parents. It's going to be a protracted struggle uphill. My parents had accepted my aunt's offer to help out with therapy. I hope my brother gets some help from treatment. Setting. What transpired with my brother's birthday rampage has been questioned by several. To put it plainly, when he didn't receive a 5, he lost it and started destroying whatever he could with a chair. This was my parents' breaking point, and they grounded him severely. Update. My spoiled brat brother now enjoys some privileges which he despises. My parents are making good in making up for years of mistreating me. Since the family intervention, they have kept my brother in check. They even said they would organize my birthday party the next year and bake my favorite cake with my name on it. Because my parents were having him do dishes in the kitchen, my brother did hear this. He immediately stopped what he was doing and headed to his room. Not feigned tears, just total disengagement. Every time I go, he still glares at me from his window. My brother's parents gave him some privileges for good behavior when I visited a while back, even though they essentially go against everything he wants. In recognition of his good behavior, my dad took out his ancient Game Boy Color from the 90s, which was 64 years old. When my brother was offered the chance to use them, he still had most of his old games for both systems and an outdated CRT TV, but he just grumbled that they were dated and uninteresting. My father simply stated that he might get dressed then and resume his reading. My brother was pleading for the old 90s game consoles one night prior. He used to own a gaming PC, a number of game consoles, and a gaming chair that included Bluetooth speakers. His bed or a folding chair are now his only gaming chairs. Around the time he acquired the N64 for the first time, I stopped by to visit because my parents wanted to have me over for dinner. While playing Mario 64 in his room, I got to watch my brother yelling at the old CRT TV. He wasn't at all pleased, especially because he was unable to access the internet in order to look up cheat codes, walkthroughs, or tutorials for the Game Boy Color. I noticed he had at least one Donkey Kong game and a few Pokemon games. According to my dad, my brother will get an upgraded Game Boy Advance if he continues to excel at the end of the summer. However, my parents soon discovered that the Game Boy Color would require 2 AA batteries. My brother is now required to utilize a power cord for it. He does play it too. Perhaps he was lacking a way to exercise because he used to play video games with his phone in his hands so much. And my brother, who enjoys riding, no longer has a bike after our parents sold it. My brother's room now has a used exercise bike that my dad found on Facebook Marketplace. On the same day, he also picked up a little boombox and a used CD player. Basically, my brother pedals the exercise bike fiercely, tunes into music that makes him feel good, and from the look on his face, he rides the bike hard since he can't go outside unless it's to perform chores. I would refer to it as hate riding, since it resembles the expression you might anticipate seeing on the face of a resentful prisoner working out in their cell while they wait to be released and exact retribution. My parents share my concerns about this, which I had brought up to them. In order to sell CDs containing my brother's favorite music from his gaming computer, my dad started burning the music himself. Every week he behaved well. He would receive one of the 10 tracks on each burned CD. Since this began, he has only received one. This isn't due to poor behavior, but rather to the fact that not enough time has passed for him to receive more. My brother's actions may or may not be considered good. Simply said, he's not acting badly. Most of the time, I can see it in his face rather than hear it in his voice as he grumbles at me through his window as I hop on my minibike to head home. He looks at our parents differently when they're not looking, but he still clearly resents me. He gives them a sneer as if they've ruined his life. To put it in words, though, he gives me an envious gaze as though I have everything he could ever want. The expression seems to be saying, "Wait till I'm 18. When I decided to move out of my high school apartment, I had similar feelings, but with my aunt's aid, I made sure I had plans for my future. However, my brother is presumably still considering it because he has no idea how to accomplish that, in the easiest manners that children typically do. I sound like a know-it-all now, oh dear. My brother and I have attempted to communicate, but he is not very talkative. I've been spending time with him by dropping by every few days. He's become extremely quiet, so we don't talk much, but he seems to like having someone to play with because our parents won't let us. Each time I visit, he gladly hands me a controller. On Dad's old N64, we've largely been playing racing games like Mario Kart in my brother's room. When he plays, he gets fairly aggressive. Almost every move he makes causes him to wildly thrash the controller, and on a few occasions when he was losing, he even shoved me over. To prevent him from doing that, I've learnt to brace my legs. He is starting to get better, but he did throw a few small fits when he lost. He's been a little more cooperative with me since I printed game guides, cheat codes, and game information for some of the old N64 games he's been playing and put them in a binder for him. I cautioned our parents that it was probably not a good idea to acquire supplies for my brother's summer homeschooling. The idea is to soften and increase his acceptance of others because he is already nearly always angry. His life will no longer proceed as planned, not aggravate him further. I reminded my dad of the events of the previous 10 years, which made him upset with me and made him realize that he is the father and not me. I was the target of a lot of favoritism and blame, and I had to hide my money at my aunt's house because my brother was always trying to take it. I didn't say he's a horrible dad directly, but it was strongly hinted at. My mother told him I was right and that trying to make my brother attend summer school at home would not be helpful. My dad became irrational after that and went to the living room to drink by himself. My mother has frequently expressed regret to me for her previous behavior. She claims that she is too responsible because my dad merely agreed with her suggestion to lavish so much attention on my brother. She informed me that she had never considered my brother's adult life at the time. She continued to indulge him in an attempt to retain him as a baby, since she essentially refused to acknowledge that he would grow up. My parents have made an appointment for couples counseling, but because of the waiting period, it will take some time for them to be seen. It's fairly evident that my dad is not excited about it. His admission of guilt is more difficult to get than my mother's. After he gave in and acknowledged how much he had messed up during the family intervention, he has attempted to pass like a typical dad. However, I've made it plain that trying to act like nothing happened won't make it go away, and my mother supports me in this. That's the current state of affairs then. I hope to provide a better update in the future. Update 5. This isn't the update I was expecting. My brother was pleading with her, so my mom started surreptitiously restoring other rights to him when my dad was at work. Why? Since he is unique. My mom was unable to control my brother and began allowing him to act independently once more, even though my dad was trying to hold him responsible. And once she began giving him what he needed once more, my brother kept asking for more and more from her. My brother demanded that his mother replace some of the things they sold, calling her names when she refused, claiming that Dad would notice. My mom had purchased a used Switch with a copy of Zelda, but when she allowed him to play it covertly and allowed him to use his laptop, which was meant to be taken away unless needed for schoolwork, my brother started to act out. Over the course of several days, this kept happening. My mother eventually reached her breaking point when my brother started acting violently. She gave my brother the firmest face slap she could manage before going into a full mental breakdown and hurting herself. She continued injuring herself, so she ended up contacting my dad to come home early. My mom was literally beating herself when he got home in a hurry, and he had to stop her. This is something she has never done before. My brother was freaking out about it and was in complete shock. My dad moved his ass raw and laid the blame on my brother. When I was a child, he would spank me a few times, but later on, my dad told me that he'd really cried on my brother, calling him an unappreciative brat. After doing everything for him, they removed the Switch that my mother had been keeping hidden. We had to take my mom to the emergency room and then needed to be kept for a mental health assessment. She needed to be hospitalized because it was discovered that she was really stressed out and had severe anxiety. I came into a photo that my father had taken of my mother before to her being placed under mental hold. She would rip off some of her own hair, have 2 black eyes, and a bloated face. Although my dad hinted that she had done more to herself, I failed to notice. But while they were out, my dad urged me to babysit my brother because he was worried my brother may do something crazy too. Following all that transpired, my brother was crying and huddled in his closet when I arrived. Other than a few brief apologies, he wouldn't say much to me before jolting. I ordered and had delivered his favorite pizza on my own dime, if I could have touched him at all. It's filled crust BBQ chicken. After we forced him to leave his room, we awkwardly ate dinner in silence. After that, we played Mario Kart on the N64 for a while until he started crying. He questioned me about his true character. I informed him, even though at first I was hesitant to say anything. I told him that our parents were to blame for our privileged upbringing, not him. However, as he ages, he is no longer able to hold our parents solely responsible. I added that he was angry, entitled, and a thief who needed significant counseling. He also blamed others for his own mistakes and stole from individuals. After crying for a while longer, my brother requested me to leave the room. We chatted in the living room for perhaps an hour after he finally emerged. I informed my brother about the obligations when he inquired about what it was like to be an adult. I've been working a job, saving money each month for other expenses, and paying for things like petrol, rent, utilities, etc. I said that he'll get there in a few short years, and he was very astonished because no one had ever explained adult life to him like this before. My sibling expressed his desire to not have to be an adult. He enjoys playing video games on his own terms, but he later acknowledged that he knew I would point out that this was incorrect. I nodded and told him he was right. He had to have everything, so I took lemons and created lemonade any way I could. I told him how little I had compared to him growing up, similar to how I used to hide my money at my aunt's place, and how I was scared to hold on to lovely things for fear that Dad would take them away. They had a heart-to-heart conversation until we seen Dad pull in. Before my father entered the home, my brother quickly returned to his room. My dad looked really bad when I saw him. He appeared to have been crying and was in a terrible state. He apologized to me in tears, telling me that he couldn't believe he had been so naive to the fact that he was such a bad dad for so long. We gave each other a hug. He continued to cry. Then he told me everything that had transpired, baring his soul. He's never sobbing in my eyes. My mother still hasn't returned home after more than a week and almost 2. If I had waited this long to write about it, maybe my mother would have returned. But she's still there, wherever she may be at the moment. My mom may have been declared a threat to herself and placed in an institution, but my dad won't discuss the situation further. If not, I believe she would have returned home by now. My brother now does the housework and has greatly calmed down. Dad delivers it to him without protest. In addition, they returned the Switch his mother had purchased for him and advised him not to take anything for granted this time around, since he would have to work for each privilege one at a time to regain them all. My brother and I spoke on the phone yesterday while my dad was still at work. He admitted that he was terrified of him, but he also mentioned that my dad hasn't even come close to hitting him since the day that his mother went insane. He acknowledged that he wished things could still be the same as they were in the past. He misses his bike, his games, and all of his gadgets. When I asked my father about the bike, he told me that while he'll purchase him another one eventually, for now he's just too busy worrying about his mother to even consider such things. I'm not sure how to proceed at this point. Of course, I'm aware of how dysfunctional my family is and how much help they require. Although I am beginning to feel sad for my brother, I also realize that he needs to learn this lesson in order to get on with his life. However, I disagreed with the manner in which his father spanked him. I haven't told him that, and I don't think I ever will unless he does it again, which I doubt he will, as he deeply regrets it and my brother is beginning to learn appropriate behavior. However, I'm still not sure how I feel about all of this. I expected drama, but I didn't anticipate this degree of drama in trying to encourage my family to change for the better.